Derek Carr officially signs with the Saints. What does that mean for everybody's dynasty value on that offense? All that and more this episode of Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Magdziuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is the lovely Kate Magdziuk. Follow her on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. Kate, the NFL Combine wrapped up on Sunday. We've got all this really fun data to talk about. And then, of course, we've got some fun quarterback news. But how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It was a great NFL Combine. I'm exhausted, Marcus.
Yes.
My brain is totally tired, but it was a very good weekend. We saw a lot of exciting quarterback play, got to see a lot of on the field workouts, which was fun. Some Combine participants really crushed it, and I'm excited to talk about them. But more so, we've got the quarterback news, which we've got to discuss. Derek Carr closing in, finalizing a deal with the Saints, supposed to be a 4-year contract. Don't know if any official terms have been released here just yet. We're kind of right in the thick of it, but give me your rapid reaction to this news and what this means for Carr's future. Is this the fit you were hoping for?
Yes, strangely enough. Now, just to be clear, I don't think this is like an awesome fit for his dynasty value. I think he's just kind of like a low end QB2 in super flex leagues, right? Like it is what it is. Like when is the last time Derek Carr's been really fantasy relevant? It's been a while. However, I think if you're like a Chris Olave dynasty owner, or some of these other players on the offense that you like maybe a little bit, maybe a Juwan Johnson potential breakout guy, I think this is a great fit because Derek Carr can feed receivers. We saw that last year with Devontae Adams. We saw that a couple of years before with Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow. He can get the ball to those weapons, and he doesn't really run. So his game is going to be based on staying in the pocket, delivering the ball. I love this for Chris Olave. Love it.
Yeah, I think I think this is a good fit for all around. Like you mentioned, though, I don't think this does really anything for Derek Carr's dynasty value at this point. I
Nothing.
think
Yep.
we can kind of evaluate him uh, honestly as if he had been on the Las Vegas Raiders. Like it really just kind of a lateral move. Doesn't have nearly as established a weapon Chris Olave, one of our favorite dynasty prospects. He's a young guy who's incredibly productive in his rookie season. But does he lose anything making the move from a Devontae Adams to a Chris Olave, who is again extremely talented, but less experienced at the NFL level?
No, I don't think so. He's playing behind a better offensive line, playing indoors, and playing in I think the weakest division in the NFL. I think this is a good fit. I think this will make the Saints competitive. I know that we really don't talk about that part a lot, but I think Olave is just going to get a ton of downfield targets, and that's what Derek Carr is good at. And I think he's good enough to support another weapon in the passing game. Who is that going to be? It's not going to be Michael Thomas because the Saints are going to have to cut Michael Thomas this year. Is it Johnson? Is Adam Troutman? Does he come back from the dead and become fantasy relevant? I don't know. But I think if you are investing in the Saints offense, I think you feel good today.
If I'm picking one guy, it's going to be Juwan Johnson for me, who I absolutely loved what we saw out of him in the 2022 season. Was really just kind of came out of left field, but was, I think more than capable at establishing himself as a receiver. He was an undrafted free agent, 6'4", 232 pounds. So he's a little bit smaller for like that traditional dual threat tight end, but 508 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns in 2022, his third NFL season. Ran a lot of routes, and he was productive with those, especially
Mhm.
as a scoring asset. So Juwan Johnson, biggest winner for me.
I agree. Back to Chris Olave really quickly. He's being drafted as wide receiver 11 right now in startup drafts, behind guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams. Does that change at all after the news of Derek Carr?
Not for me. Again, it feels like a very lateral move. Although maybe Derek Carr does provide this offense a little bit more stability.
And I
I
think
think,
I think some more explosiveness. Like, he's just a better deep ball thrower than Andy Dalton. He just is.
yeah, I think that's fair. We're gonna get to see a lot of interesting movement. I think this is going to be a really weird year for the Saints. I think it's going to be a very telling year. I think the draft is going to be super critical to like establishing their identity as a team. But I do think Derek Carr provides you enough safety to give you like the luxury to figure out what is my team's identity. Are we a passing team? Are we a running
Yeah.
team? Are like they're middle of the pack in so many different areas. Defense, it everything's middle of the pack. So I think having that stability at quarterback gives you this ability to figure out what's going on with the rest of your roster and start to establish yourselves as a contending team in a not very competitive division.
I got a hot take that I'm ready to fire off. Ready?
Let's hear it.
I'm gonna whisper it so people don't hear it too loudly. I'd rather have Chris Olave than Garrett Wilson in Dynasty right now.
Okay. Does that stand if the New York Jets get Aaron Rodgers?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I think it's because I know Derek Carr is a short term solution, but Aaron Rodgers hasn't thrown for over 250 yards in a game in, is it like 17 weeks, basically, the entire year. It's been a long time. So I kind of think Derek Carr is going to be more willing to just chuck the ball all over the field and be reckless with the football, which is what we kind of want for a dynasty receiver, like somebody who's just going to pepper him with 12 targets, which Derek Carr does, by the way. He locks into one target and that guy gets absolutely fed, rather than an Aaron Rodgers who likes to be careful and safe with the ball and don't throw interceptions and don't throw incompletions. So, yeah, give me Chris Olave. I know that might seem like a short term take, but that's how I feel.
No, I mean, they're kind of A1, AB, like
Yep.
A1, AB,
Sure.
A1, A2, whatever you want to say. But I mean, look, from evaluating like the prospects themselves, you couldn't ask for two players that were close enough.
Yep.
Even literally on the field, they were quite close coming out
Yes.
of Ohio
100%.
State.
All right, Kate, let's talk about some of the biggest combine winners and losers next. This episode is brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want all the fat and the calories, then you've got to try a Built Bar. Listen, we're getting close to summer and everybody's trying to get into beach shape. If you want to stick to your diet, but you also want to enjoy something, try a Built Bar. They're absolutely fantastic. Only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, but a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't even need to wait to get a box. For years, we've been talking about going to built.com and ordering there, which you could still do, by the way. But now you can go to your local Walmart, go to the pharmacy section, and pick up a 4 bar box of cookies and cream or double chocolate or the coconut puffs. Or if you live near a Sam's Club, go grab a 13 bar box with some of the hit flavors, including brownie batter and churro. You can thank us later. All right, Kate, we've got a lot of combine stuff to get through. Who is just your biggest winner overall? Like, you've one player that just completely stood out to you.
I mean, I'm not gonna break any brains here by saying, but Anthony Richardson, 100% won the NFL
Yep.
Combine, just crushed it, just across the board. And Marcus, it's kind of interesting because the talk after, like kind of amongst some of these dynasty communities and Twitter has been really interesting because on one hand, you have a group of people saying like the combine taught us absolutely nothing. We
Mhm.
knew Anthony Richardson was a bonkers athlete, which we did. But there's another section that I think, deserves a little bit of love too. And it's the fact that, like, did we know he was going to be this good? I
We
don't
knew
think
he was
like
going to be athletic, but I don't know if anybody predicted this athletic.
nobody predicted that at least nobody that I saw was predicting a historical performance at the NFL Combine for Anthony Richardson. I do think that's sort of the difference, right? Like we know what the upside of an RG3 like a freak athletic prospect is. Um and again, this is just reactionary to what we saw on the field, but even off the field. We heard rave reviews from him in terms of his interviews with teams. Scouts reported all weekend long that, teams are falling in love with this kid. He interviewed well, just across the board. There wasn't anything that came out about Anthony Richardson in this entire process that made you think twice until you go back and look at the tape
Yep.
and the stats.
Yeah, I mean, Richardson's obviously one of the biggest winners. I'm going to stick with the quarterbacks, Kate. Now, this player didn't do any of the athletic testing, but I thought CJ Stroud was
Mhm.
unbelievable in some of the passing stuff. And I know, listen, you shouldn't really care about the on field passing drills because you're throwing to receivers that you've never worked with before. It doesn't really translate. However, I mean, you see the appeal with CJ Stroud. Like, he is just so accurate and the ball placement is so good. And I just feel like he's really safe. Like, he's going to walk into the NFL, be a competent starter. And I think there's some Dak Prescott upside where, like, hey, if you get in the right scheme with the right weapons around you, you could be a top 10 quarterback without having to squint too hard. So I just thought Stroud looked awesome this week.
Stroud looked awesome, and I will say I think he's like one of the lowest key winners. Like
Yeah.
nobody's really come out of this weekend talking a whole lot about CJ Stroud, but you mentioned the fact that you can't put too much weight on these on the field workouts because again, these are quarterbacks throwing to receivers that they don't have reps with. Like
Correct.
we know that quarterback receiver connections, there's a lot about chemistry, there's a lot about timing there. But that makes it all the more impressive that he just seamlessly and so effortlessly connected with these wide receivers that he doesn't have that rapport with, right? Like imagine when he's on the field, I don't know, let's say the Houston Texans draft him number 2, and then they swoop right back around, grab Jackson Smith and Jigbo at their
Sure.
second pick, I think is at 12. You get him a receiver he's very familiar with. I think we could have a really, really interesting bit of upside. And again, not a whole lot of people are talking about him, but what you like to see is that all of that accuracy that, we praise that he's just got beautiful touch for a quarterback.
Yeah.
Everything is just
Yeah.
it's perfect. Everything about the ball placement, everything about the force he's throwing the ball with, it's just all perfect. And that translated to the field, which is exciting.
And I can see him landing in like 5 different spots and being like, you know what? That's right. Like, if he goes to the Colts, I'm like, okay, makes sense. If he goes to the Raiders, fantastic. Devontae Adams is going to love him. Like, I think he's one of the safest quarterback prospects in this draft. And because of his accuracy, I think he's a pretty high upside as well. So a big fan of CJ Stroud. Who else impressed you?
Well, I do want to get your take. Bryce Young officially measured, and that was sort of the thing that the information we were all waiting on. Came in at 5'10", 1/8 inches, 204 pounds, which 204 pounds. I think we can all safely say that's probably not going to be his playing weight.
No, it's not
But
his playing weight.
did his measurements move the needle at all for you in any way, shape, or form this weekend?
Not really. We knew he was small, right? Like, we knew he was short. We knew that we talked about this last week. We knew he was going to put on a bunch of water weight and he was going to try to measure in over 200 pounds. And we know that he doesn't play at it. So no, I don't think anything that happened with Bryce Young should dramatically change your opinion on him either way.
I think that's exactly where I'm leaving it. Yeah, I really Bryce Young didn't really do anything in either direction regarding that height and weight. Just kind of did exactly what we were expecting. But excited to see his pro day.
Mhm.
Let's get into some running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, because
Sure.
there were plenty of people that we should be talking about here coming out of day 2 and day 3 of the combine.
Who was your most impressive receiver?
It was Jackson Smith and Jigba. And
Hmm.
maybe I'm biased because he was my wide receiver one coming into the week. Didn't run the 40-yard dash as we had discussed heading into the combine, which was disappointing. But I mean, Marcus, he looked every bit the part. And let's talk about the the drills that he did towards the end of the combine. Again, didn't run for the speed, but he did participate in the 20-yard shuttle, 3-cone, 6.57 3-cone, which is just absolutely incredible. It
Fourth
showcases
fourth fastest all time at wide receiver.
insane, and that just showcases his ability to turn, make those cuts, and that's kind of critical for a guy
Yep.
that I think is playing the position the way that he is. Love the way that he performed, and I think like on the field, just he looked like the most pro ready receiver in the workout for me.
I agree with you. I wasn't a huge Jackson Smith and Jigba fan kind of coming into the draft process, but I think that combine performance is going to force me to go back and watch the tape. It's just because he not only did the agility drills really good and all that kind of stuff, but like the actual on field performance, like so silky smooth. He was the best route runner out there.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I think I could be back in. And you go look at the numbers back in 2021 when he was playing with Chris Olave and with Garrett Wilson, and he outperformed all those guys. So it's certainly somebody else to keep an eye on. I got one more that I want to ask you about.
Is it Marvin
Darn,
Mims?
no, it's not Marvin Mims. We're
Ah,
saving
man.
him for Friday. Don't worry, I didn't forget about Marvin Mims. Darnell Washington, the
Yep.
Georgia tight end. Now we knew he was big coming into the combine. Measured it at 6'7", 264 pounds. And we had a feeling that he was going to run fairly fast. I don't remember what the official number was. Was it 4.64?
4.64 official. Yes.
That's kind of what a lot of scouts around the league were anticipating. What was shocking to me, Kate, is the 20-yard shuttle. He had the fourth fastest 20-yard shuttle at the NFL Combine this year. So you get somebody that's that big, that fast, and can change direction a little bit, and you can have him on the field right away as a blocker, and he can stretch the middle of the field. Like, why isn't this the number one tight end in this class?
I think is gonna do us a nice segue into our final segment here and talking about the biggest losers because there was a tight end who
Mm,
came in here as the consensus tight end one in this class, and I think he might have got booted.
yes.
Low key shout out to Zach Kuntz out of
Yeah.
Old Dominion, literally just absolutely crushed the combine. Like uh, Penn State transferred to Old Dominion in 2021, posted 692 yards and 5 touchdowns in his first season with the team. But like just across the board, 34-inch arms, 83rd percentile, 4.55 40, 92nd percentile,
Mhm.
big hands, 40-inch vert. He was the tallest player to record a 40-inch vert since 2003, 98th percentile in his broad jump. Like this dude crushed the combine. Unfortunately suffered a season-ending injury in 2022, so we didn't get to see that full season of what might have been, but I have a feeling that that athletic profile is going to bump him up some draft boards for sure.
100% agree. All right, let's talk about some of the biggest losers from the NFL Combine next. All right, Kate. Who do you have that you were a little bit disappointed with their performance over the weekend?
There are a few, but let's segue from our tight end conversation. Let's talk about Michael Mayer,
Yep.
tight end out of Notre Dame. Just like did not post any of the numbers that I think we wanted to see. Ran a 4.7 official 40-yard dash, which we saw a lot of really athletic tight ends in
It's
this
fine.
group.
I think it's fine for
It's
him. It's just
fine.
fine.
It's just fine, right? His metrics across the board, 32.5-inch vert, sub 10-foot broad jump. Like I think just generally speaking, with your expectations coming in for the tight end one, and then seeing the performances of a Darnell Washington, of a Zach Kuntz, Sam Laporta, like there were other guys that just popped more throughout their workout. Their numbers popped more. So in terms of like what he did, it's fine. But I think it's where he kind of lost the most steam as tight end one for me comes with the comparison against
Yep.
other tight ends who just absolutely crushed it. And we know this is a really good tight end class.
And then on top of that, like, I think there's some expectation. Hey, this is a big tight end, 6'5", 260, comes in at 6044, so 6'4.5", 249, so under 250 pounds. Runs a 4.7, which is a good time, but it's not an elite time. And I think people are just wondering, like, okay, what separates him from like Cole Kmet as a prospect coming out of the same school? Like, they're very similar. The numbers are very similar. The only difference is this Kmet was a little bit bigger than Michael Mayer. So I agree with you. Another guy that I want your opinion on, Kayshon Boutte,
Out.
who, yeah, I mean, so we were kind of out on him just in general because of some of the off the field stuff, some of the inconsistencies. And then he tests as a below average athlete. Not only does he not measure in at 6 foot, or I think he was listed at 6'1", comes in at 5'11", 195 pounds. He had the worst vertical of all the receivers at the combine, 29 inches, a very poor broad jump. And then he runs a 4.5, which again, that's not a bad time, but it's also not an elite time. Like, if you're taking a chance on one of these receivers that has some questionable off the field stuff and some maturity, you want them to be an elite athlete. Very similar like to George Pickens last year, right? Pickens had some maturity problems, tested as a absurd athlete. Just not the case with Kayshon Boutte.
No, it almost feels like he wasn't like he didn't prep for this combine
Yep.
at all. And obviously I can't speak to that. I don't know
But
about
it
his
feels
prep,
like
but
that, right?
it feels like it. And this is already a guy that we had concerns about his preparedness. Like we talked about his route running in his final season at LSU, just like at times felt super lazy, didn't seem like he wanted to be there. And it felt like that was kind of a similar vibe that we got at the combine. And like, if you're not going to get an elite athlete, you want a guy with heart. And it doesn't feel like Kayshon Boutte is uh, filling that role very well. Another loser at the wide receiver position, my best boyfriend, Tank Dell out of Houston, came in. We knew he was going to be small, 5'8", and 3/8 inches, 165 pounds. Like, none of that is a surprise, right? But I think what was surprising, ran a 4.49 40-yard dash. Like, just wasn't overly explosive. And you kind of expect these guys that are more undersized to hopefully have more of those explosive elements to their game and see those numbers start to pop. His on the field workout, like, he had some drops. It just wasn't, he didn't look like Tank Dell of Houston out there.
The good news is the 40-yard dash was disappointing, but he did run a 1.49 10-yard split, which is in like the 92nd percentile. So he is quick. He's just not, he doesn't have Tyreek Hill speed, right?
Which, Marcus, that, I mean, that showcase, like, so that 10-yard split, it shows your burst in these short
Yep.
ranges, which, like, that was the part of his eval that popped for me, was his ability to move and create separation in short yardage situations. So I'm happy that translated. I just don't think, like, there's nothing that Tank Dell did this week to improve his draft stock.
I
And
agree. I think it probably hurt him a little bit.
yeah.
Yeah. Other than that, I mean, I know some people are going to mention Jordan Addison running a 4.49 at 173 pounds. Honestly, it just doesn't bother me all that much because we knew he was light. We knew he wasn't a burner. He's quick, but he's not necessarily a burner. Tested as like a 59th percentile athlete. I don't think he profiles as a number one wide receiver anyways. I just think he's going to be a really solid actual NFL wide receiver too. But I think if you were hoping for him to be something more than that, you were probably a little disappointed.
Yeah, definitely agree there for the amount of hype and for what we see on the field. It just didn't feel like the numbers don't pop as much of
No.
as his game does on the field. Um, Last but not least, any running backs you want to shout out as losers or even as winners, because we didn't even touch on the running back position in our winners segment. Is there Any names that pop for you?
Mm, not really. I feel like this running back class, we kind of knew what we were getting, right? Like we kind of knew what guys were going to test well and which ones were going to maybe run a little bit slower. I don't think anything that Bijan Robinson did was all that surprising. Like we knew he was going to run in the high 4.4s, and that's what he did. So I know that's probably a bad take, but I don't. Was there anybody for you?
I think the only player that popped, and again, this is like totally just measurables driven, right? Like it's hard not to just be a little disappointed. I was hoping that Deuce Vaughn would at least measure in at his listed height of 5'6", came in at 5'5".
Yeah,
He's really tiny. He's super tiny. The arm length for Deuce Vaughn, really concerning for me. Sub 28 inches, 27 inches and
he's
three
small.
quarters. He's so small. And I think he, just the measurables in general came in a lot smaller than even I was expecting based on listed height and weight. It none of that seemed to be a problem on the field when you watched him at Kansas State. So like take it all with a grain of salt, but if he finds a substantial role in the NFL, it is going to be a huge outlier.
Yeah. All right, that is it for today's show. Thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. Now make your second listen the Locked On NFL Draft Show. Damian Parsons and Keith Sanchez provide in-depth coverage of the biggest NFL draft prospects with deep dives into sleepers and hidden gems that can change your favorite NFL franchise. Find Locked On NFL Draft wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Kate, you guys can go follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Matt and Ryan back on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Kate, you and I back on Friday to discuss a certain Oklahoma wide receiver. We'll see you guys then.